So we're live with Professor Monica. I'm Luke Ford. We're discussing the novel My Name Is Asher Lev. And we got these questions from Buffy, the English Lit professor, who is not Jewish. And she writes 12 questions, 12 theses that she
They're great
nails
too.
to the front of my website. Yeah. So question number one. Early on in My Name Is Asher Lev, Asher sees his father reading a passage from the tractate Sanhedrin in the Talmud, which says that any man who has caused a single Jewish soul to perish, the Torah considers it as if he had caused the whole world to perish. Any man who has saved a Jewish soul, it is as if he has saved the whole world. Asher, in response, asks if this concept applies only to the Jew, to which his father replies that no, elsewhere the same passage appears without the word Jewish. Nevertheless, throughout the novel, both Asher's father and the Mashpiach ascribe a special worth to the Jewish soul which they denied to the Goy. For example, Asher's father at one point, in imagining Asher will soon become a Goy, asserts, "Better you should not have been born." Can we read such instances as distortions of genuine Judaic principles? What distinctions does the Jewish tradition at its core make between Jews and non-Jews, and are these distinctions identical to those held by the Hasidic sect? So I want to say one thing and then I'll toss it to you. The question, is this a distortion of general Judaic principles? We didn't get the first Judaic principles until Judaism was about 3,000 years old with the Rambam, when he came up with his 13 essential principles of the Jewish faith. So Judaism was basically 3,000 years old before a prominent rabbi developed the creed. So there are no genuine Judaic principles. It's not a doxology. It's not a creed. In the last 900 years, various rabbis have come up with what they think is the essence of Judaism, the essential beliefs of Judaism, but it's generally not a belief-centric religion. These are the principles that you should believe. So anyway, Monica, what's your reaction to this first question?
But if there were to be a principle of Judaism, it would be the primacy of human life, I would say. And in that regard, I don't think there's ever going to be a distinction between a Jew and a Goy, so to speak. Let me give you an example. I have a friend who is teaching in a Middle Eastern country, an Islamic country. And she was driving down one of the roads, highways, and she saw a car accident. And she saw, it looked pretty bad. There was a girl lying halfway out of the vehicle, and a bunch of men were just kind of standing around looking at it. And so my friend pulls over, and she figures out that because in the Islamic tradition, similar to Orthodox Judaism, right, men are forbidden from touching women. So they were just letting the woman lay there in this pile of wreckage. So of course my friend dragged the woman out and was the hero of the day. That wouldn't happen with the group of Jews, even if they were Orthodox Jews. Right. It's always about the primacy of the other human being. It's always about saving a life. It's always about taking care of people. And so that's what I would say about the distinction between a Jew and a Goy. I mean, that's one place where there's never a distinction. But there is a distinction when it comes to commandment, right? Jews are supposed to carry out 613 commandments, so to speak, whereas, non-Jews aren't necessarily supposed to carry those out. What is it? For the righteous Gentile, there's seven. Seven basics. 7 commandments, which are really just basic fleshings out of the 10 Commandments. So in other words, within Judaism, Jews are seen as more, they're responsible for more. They're held to a higher standard by themselves in some ways. That's what I would say.
So, have so many points. This is such a complex question. First of all, the Torah, the Jewish Bible, so to speak, is the only Bible of the major religions of which I'm aware that starts out universally. You don't get your first Jew, Abraham, until chapter 12 of the book of Genesis. So while the New Testament starts with Jesus, and the Quran is all about Muhammad, the Jewish Bible starts out with the world, and very early on in Genesis we get the teaching that humanity is created in God's image and therefore has infinite worth. So this is long before there are any Jews. So I don't think you'd find anything in the Bible, the Jewish Bible, Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, that would imply that a Jewish soul, a Jewish life is more valuable than a non-Jewish life. As Jewish history develops, it goes through many stages. So you will get statements in Jewish tradition that do say that the Jewish life is more valuable than a non-Jewish life. Very few and far between, basically, until you get to the Kabbalah. Kabbalah is fairly trendy the last 10-20 years. Kabbalah means Jewish mysticism. It developed basically in about the 12th, 13th century, and it grew out of a time when Jews were heavily persecuted, and it's like a mystical, esoteric fantasy world that some Jews escaped to. And in Kabbalah, there is a teaching in Kabbalah that the Jewish soul is different from the non-Jewish soul. Now, the Kabbalah is, I would say that, in my opinion, is outside of normative Judaism, but others would disagree with me. That's a debate. I believe that I am conveying the majority opinion on that question. Hasidic Judaism is strongly influenced by Kabbalah. So this idea in Hasidic Judaism, Hasidic Jews have very limited contact with non-Jews. So their world is Jewish. So I'm thinking about Chaim Kunin, the head rabbi of Chabad in California. He was like 5 or 6 years old before he realized there were non-Jews in the world. So if you're living in a very insular environment, the other is not as real to you because you have almost no meaningful contact with the other. Also, if you observe Jewish law, for instance, prohibits you from eating food prepared by a non-Jew. So if you're observant of Jewish law, it makes it very hard to have meaningful social interactions with non-Jews. Therefore, whatever your religion teaches about the infinite worth of non-Jews, they're not going to be as real to you if you don't have meaningful interactions with them. So, for all intents and purposes, if you're leading an observant Jewish life and accompanying that you have almost no meaningful social interaction with non-Jews, you will look at these texts and you will look at the world overwhelmingly in terms of Jews. Is it good for the Jews? Will this save Jewish lives? And will this perpetuate Judaism? So non-Jews don't become, are not as real if you're leading a traditional Jewish life, observing Jewish law, and therefore largely circumscribed from having meaningful contact with non-Jews. So, go ahead.
It can be a very insular world, and there's a necessary disconnect from everything else that comes with being part of any kind of society or community that's closed off from what we call the real world.
So what distinction does the Jewish tradition make between Jews and non-Jews? Well, the focus of the Jewish tradition is on Jews. So Judaism has largely spoken just to Jews because Jews have been so persecuted over the past 2,000 years. So only in modern times have Jews started speaking to the world from within the Jewish tradition. So Judaism's focus, the focus of Jewish text, is on what are the obligations of Jews, primarily their obligations to their fellow Jews, because Judaism is primarily lived within a traditional Jewish community. So your focus is on how you treat your fellow Jews. So you'll have these texts such as anyone who has caused the soul to perish, and sometimes it will be translated just as caused the soul to perish, and other times it will be translated as just cause the Jewish soul to perish, because for all intents and purposes, the people who study these texts live their lives overwhelmingly just with fellow Jews. So that's just the way you think when you lead a traditional observant Jewish life. Hasidic Jewish life is more closed off from the world than, say, modern Orthodox Jewish life, and probably even more than Haredi Litvish, which is the Lithuanian style of Judaism, which is like the polar opposite of Hasidic Judaism. Hasidic Judaism